Hello, everyone. I'm so excited about my guest today. Her and I actually go way back. I first met Dominique, I can't even remember the year, but you were my student at Texas State with
Yes, I think it was 2010.
2010. So it's been a hot minute right now.
Yes.
So, and before, if anyone is joining us on the video, I want to let you know she is not driving right now. She is a
I'm not
passenger in
driving.
the
No.
vehicle. Okay, all right. So we don't have to worry about distracted driving. But I'm so excited to have you here today because I really want to just have you share some pieces of your story and kind of talk to people about where you are now and how you keep yourself. I mean, just looking at you now, everyone who
Oh my
can't see
gosh.
her, she's smiling or she's glowing. She's just always kind of exudes this presence of somebody you want to be around because you're like, oh, that girl knows where the fun is. So I want you to tell everyone how you keep the magic and sparkle alive, given everything that you've gone through. So
Oh my
give us
gosh.
a story. Tell us
Magic and sparkle alive. Okay, so
that.
um I find myself lately having surrounding myself with like really positive people. It took me a while to learn boundaries and how to filter out people who deserve my energy versus those who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I learned that through through a lot of spending time by myself and therapy, I I think I just started wanting to be around people who wanted to be around me. Um, and that really, I mean, honestly, it sounds cheesy, but that kind of saved me. Like being around people who
Yeah.
wanted to be around me and not having to like beg for energy and pull for
Oh,
energy
oh,
um, makes a hell of a difference.
it does. It doesn't sound
And
cheesy at all.
especially after last year, which okay, like 2020 was like a blip, like like a blip in a simulation. So it was definitely really important for me to find my tribe and to find like good people to be around. Because I don't think any of us knew what was going to happen last year.
Yeah. You already have said so much, talking about boundaries and really surrounding yourself with the people who are going to give back to you energetically. So talk to me a little bit about what got you to that place where you knew that you had to do that. Give us a
Oh
little
my
bit about
gosh.
your background and your story and, what made you get to that point.
I okay, nothing against people pleasers, right? But I used to be like a huge people pleaser.
Same,
Um,
same.
and I used to also find myself um, you know how you can kind of feel when a relationship and not just like boyfriend girlfriend but even like a friendship is kind of falling apart,
Yep.
and you try your best to save it and you feel like you're the only one doing the work and it just becomes exhausting. um, I found myself in a lot of that, especially like after college, like post college, and you're trying to maintain these friendships with people that you've met in college and you think like we had this big connection, and you kind of some of them once you get out into the real world you realize we weren't as close as I thought we were, we didn't have a lot in common like I thought we did.
Yeah.
But because of that longevity and that time spent, you try to hold on to them and then you just get to a point to where it's not worth it and you realize that.
Mhm.
And then again, when you learn self boundaries and setting boundaries towards how you allow people to treat you, you start to realize that. And that was something that I started to realize with like people who, after college, I was like, we were so close then, like what happened? And you realize there's a growth there.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think
and you
like,
just don't want to force yourself in anyone's life anymore. So you're just like,
right.
I think this is the part where I set a boundary and realizing what knowing my worth, and I have to kind of let go.
Mhm. Well, college is such a exploratory time anyway, where you're really coming into yourself and you can really learn so much about who you are, but you're also still in that space where you are with people in classes or where you're in close proximity with people constantly,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Whereas then after college, you kind of take that identity and exploration of self. And then it's really like, okay, now how am I going to do this in the real world, quote unquote, right? Or like
For
in a space
sure.
where I'm figuring it out. And yeah, it's hard when you start to realize that once you don't have that context of togetherness in college anymore, that some of those really close bonds feel so different, or you
Absolutely.
realize you see them in a different light, and then that almost causes a different whole exploration of self that you kind of aren't expecting to go through again.
Absolutely. Because at that point, you're like, I'm an adult
Yeah.
ish. And you're thinking to yourself, Like, I don't, you get comfortable and you're like, I don't want to have to make friends again, but you have to do it. It happens.
Well, you know, I'm teaching so many seniors right now, so they're going to need to listen to this and hear that too, because I think that is the thing, is just sometimes even recognizing what that space is going to look like and hearing from people who've gone through it is so helpful, because otherwise just even our own expectations of what that's going to feel like, you think you're going to get out of college and everything's just going to unfold then,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah. There's a part of you that I remember for me, it was, I totally thought I was going to graduate from college, move to LA, um, work in entertainment, public relations, and have this like fancy life like Lauren Conrad off the hills. And it was like the complete polar opposite. But like, I wouldn't change the experience for anything. Like, I learned a lot about myself. I had to learn how to step outside my comfort zone. Because I didn't have friends in LA, so I had to learn how to make friends
yeah, so
all
tell
over
everyone,
again.
so you did move to LA, so you
I
graduated from
did. Yeah. So
college.
like, I graduated from Texas State in 2010. January of 2011, I went back home to Seattle for like 2 months, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna give this LA thing a try. And so this is at the time when Craigslist was still sketchy but kind of safe. I definitely wouldn't recommend doing this now, but I found like a roommate off of Craigslist, moved to LA, and just like took a bunch of freelance jobs. And freelance is great, especially when there's longevity, but when it's a short project, it's really nerve wracking, because then you have to find like another project because you don't want your money to like run out.
Right.
And I stayed in this like I shared this tiny apartment um, with a guy who worked for SAG on Melrose. And it was beautiful because when I opened my window, like the curtains to my window, I would see the Hollywood sign. And so that was like the beautiful part of it.
Yeah.
But then I realized like I just didn't have like the energy anymore to like keep interviewing for place after place after place, knowing that I was qualified, or at least should have made it to, a second round of interviews or something. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely brag about myself. I had the experience, I had interned, so I was like, I got this stuff in the bag.
Yeah, you're going through those interviews, you have the experience, you felt like you should have been moving farther. So even just one thing you said, when you said you saw the Hollywood sign, at your window, and that was the beautiful part, you could have let people believe that that's all there was. You could have been like,
Yes,
oh yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Instead, you're like willing to say like, okay, but here's what the reality was. You are going to these interviews. That had to have just also done some damage to your self-worth too, like going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely, like I said, is a hit to the ego a little bit, because you've put in time, you put in energy. This is a plan that you've had, and when it doesn't go the way you want it to, you're kind of just like, well, what was it kind of?
Yeah.
And so I gave LA like 9 months. And then after 9 months, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back home for a little bit, and I'm going to figure out what the next move is. And so I went home back to Seattle for probably about 2 more months. And then I said, okay, I think I'm going to move to Houston.
Which it seems like quite a jump again. Okay, we were in Seattle, then we back.
Yes.
You'd been in Texas, so you knew what you knew what was up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So at the time, like, I would call people who lived in Houston. Like, I had a lot of friends and roommates from Texas State who were from Houston. So I would call and be like, what's Houston like? Like, tell me about it. And it was just like, it's a big city. And I'm like, right, but tell me more. Like, what else is it? And they were just like, it's a big city and it's hot. And I was like, okay, what's there to do there? And there's like, oh, there's a little bit of everything. So I was like, okay, I'm still going to do it. Like, even though people don't have a lot of great things to say about this city, I'm still going to move there. I'm going to do it. And
they
so
didn't sell it to you very well at all.
They didn't sell it. They didn't sell it. But I was like, I'm going to move anyway. Like, I'm going to see what's up. And everyone kept saying, Houston, why don't you move to Austin? And I was like, no, like, I basically went to school in Austin. Like, I want to live somewhere else. And so I moved to Houston, and like, I remember my first year just being like, this is a huge city, but I like which is different coming from a smaller city, because people would be like, oh my gosh, weren't you nervous or afraid of driving around or getting lost? And I was like, no, I think that was the appeal of it to me, was kind of getting lost and finding my way around Houston. And um, again, because I have a love for public relations and communications, I met a wonderful woman who later would become my mentor, named Ashia Berry, who is the co-founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Magpies and Peacocks. It's a upcycling
Oh, wow.
nonprofit. And at the time, she had just started her own PR company.
Mm-hmm.
And I freelanced for her as a PR coordinator and met so many great people. At the time, I had met Texas Representative Sylvester Turner. He's now the mayor of Houston, but I met him when he was a Texas representative, and got to really get into Houston nonprofit arts and culture. And that to me kind of was like, okay, it's not LA and it's not entertainment PR, but it's Houston and it's arts. And I actually kind of like it. And it's still kind of a way for me to express myself creatively.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
get to like write and like do all this fun stuff and bring people together through the power of art.
Well, and I
Um,
think it's so amazing because people don't realize that Houston actually has a really great arts and culture.
it's a great city for arts and
It
culture, and
is.
that is one of the things that when people, I'm like, when you talk about Houston, don't just say it's big anymore, say it's like an
Right.
art city.
Yeah. And this is such a great example of you just deciding that, okay, what you thought your dream wasn't working out for who you were. So I'm going to regroup and I'm just going to take a leap of faith, whatever that looks like, and see what happens and see where I
Yes.
land. And that's such a powerful message because I think, you could have all along the way, fear could have stopped you. Fear could have prevented you from even going to Cali in the first place.
Yeah.
You've gone back home and just been like, no, this is what I know, or this is where I want to be. But you just knew that there was something else that was pushing you. And I think it's so beautiful how then you're right. You ended up doing really exactly what you were meant to do.
Absolutely. Yes.
Completely different space. And that's the thing. I think it's such a great message too. It's like, we get so hung up on how we think things have to look or this expectation of what we want, instead of it's like, what do you want to feel? What do you want to put out
Yes.
there? What do you want back? And you're putting all of that out there and you're growing in all the ways you wanted to, even though the logistics of it don't look the way you would have selected or thought you wanted.
And that is one, and yes, that's like 1000% correct. And that is what I've had to tell myself. Like, even though it's not Hollywood, you're still doing something that you actually really like doing.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm always in my mind thinking, what else can I do? Like, what else can I be doing? But yes, you're absolutely correct. It doesn't look how I thought it would, but in another way it does.
Yeah. Well, and I think then too, just it allowed you such a space to really kind of make your job now more what it is. Like you got to explore what it was that you liked and have some freedom and flexibility to try some things out instead of just being pigeonholed in one area too. And so
Absolutely.
even that
Absolutely.
exploration of growth for you. So, so talk to us a little bit about like what fuels you now, where you're at in your position, or what's happened along the way. And
Yeah, yeah,
beyond
yeah.
from Houston, clearly it's an amazing place.
Well, Beyonce, Meg the Stallion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I,
Travis
I,
Scott. I mean, who else do we got? Tons of people.
lots of people, lots of famous Estonians. I mean, they breed talent here, honestly.
Really do. Because of the
Um,
arts and culture, though, again, it's just kind of that feeling. You really can get that people don't understand. They think it's something.
Absolutely, yes. Um, so what I love about Houston, or what I do currently, I'm a marketing manager for a theater called Stages. Um, Check us out, stageshouston.com, shameless plug. But I'm a marketing manager, and so part of that is, how do we have our audience reflect the city that we live in, right?
Mm.
Theater is predominantly a white space.
Mhm.
Um, and it's high time that people know that theater is for them, like they are welcomed in theater. And so part of what I do, or what I aim to do, is make sure that the stories we tell, the people who sit in our stages look like the city of Houston. There is no reason that it shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Um, Houston is a big melting pot. Like, it is a huge melting pot. You can go 5 miles in either direction and you're in a different community. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important that I do the work to make sure that that is reflected. And being surrounded by a great team of people, it is super easy to do that, especially when they also believe in what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I've worked in the Houston nonprofit arts and culture for about 5 years, and this is probably the first place where I feel comfortable bringing up those issues and saying, like, hey,
Mhm.
let's talk about the shows that we're putting on. Let's talk about how our audience looks. Let's talk about how we market to that audience, and not just when it's time to put on shows about Black pain or shows about brown pain. Like, really bring them in and let them know, like, this is a place where you belong.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I am now. Like, again, uh, I know I said this earlier, it's not LA, but it's definitely the work that I really love to be doing,
Yeah.
and proud to be doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that I'm in a position that allows me to definitely do that.
Well, and there's something being said for when you have pride in what you're doing, it allows you to step into it in a different way too.
Absolutely.
It's just, I think about all the conversations that you and I've had, way back when over the years too, about, about that idea of representation. You want everybody to be able to go and see these shows and find a piece of them, not just through a storyline, but visually, but through where somebody's been. And I think
Absolutely.
theater, the conversation really has opened up everywhere because people are like, yeah, does need to shift and change. Who are we casting? But then also, just the availability of shows for people. I have friends here on a theater board, and that was even the cost of attending shows. Who's really able to come? Just all sorts of different ways to look at theater and entertainment, because we need children, especially, to be able to go to these things and feel
For
that magic,
sure.
right? We need them to feed their creative spirit and bring up that next generation of performers and creatives. And so I love that you're creating that space again to just give an opportunity for more people to have access to this space that is so productive and just so really healing for many people too.
Yes. That's also very important to me as well, since I grew up with arts and theater. And as a child, as someone who especially loved ballet, thought never occurred to me that arts were just for one brand of people. I never thought that. And so it was something that I didn't even really notice.
Mhm.
And then as an adult and being on the inside looking out, I realized we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so it took an adjustment, I'm not going to lie, having to advocate for space for Black and brown people to just come to something like theater.
Yeah.
It used to kind of almost make me sad a little bit, and then I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to be sad anymore about it. I just want to fix it.
Yeah.
Like, any possible way I can fix it, I just want to fix it. And so again, that is one thing that I will say, being in a melting pot of a city has definitely allowed for me to do
Yeah.
is feel more comfortable saying we need more people who look like me in
Yeah.
this theater.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just the idea then too that that your voice is also being supported and upheld in a different way, because there are other people then who are now speaking out and stepping along with you and stating this, and I love seeing the ways then that allows you to unfold even more creatively, and that's what I think I want people to really understand, is like when we can have similar visions or even be able to share ideas, even if we don't start in the same place, but let's talk about what this would look like. Let's explore some of these possibilities, and just the energy in those conversations. If we approach it as this idea of like, okay, where can we make this go? there's such richness in those conversations that really open us up creatively, even if you don't think you're a creative person, right? Your mind starts going in a different direction. And I think then the cool thing for me to watch you do is to really see your brain working, because you do think in those creative spaces and you do think about ways for expansion. And I don't know that you would have gotten to do that in some other spaces that that you were existing in.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I will 1000% agree with you on that. I think, um, how do I say this? I think even now, like up until very recently, I still had to fight for the right to feel like, as a manager, like having that title. And I hate to say that, but titles are sometimes
Mhm.
important.
Mhm.
Um, but having that title as a manager and knowing what that comes with, still having to fight senior level management to or leadership to still have my ideas heard or suggestions turn into um, actual things that we put into play. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, the arts has allowed me to do that, but there's still times where I have to fight for that to happen.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want to give any false impressions as though this has been something
yeah.
where everybody was like, yeah, whatever you want. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is like really, you all that work you talked about in the very beginning with your boundary setting and finding your self-worth has also allowed you to feel empowered in using your voice and trying to step in those spaces where maybe 10 years ago people might have made you feel small and that meant have upset you, but then you would have somehow internalized that differently.
Yeah.
Whereas now,
Yes.
because of that work that you've done, you're able to then also professionally step into a different space, because you're like, no, I deserve to be here. I got this job. So let me tell you my voice and my ideas, and you're going to know where they came from. And
Absolutely.
that's a testament to the interpersonal work that you did, I think, even over any professional work, truly.
Yes. You know what? Advocating for yourself is a big deal, a big deal. Especially um, as a woman, but especially as a Black woman or a woman of color in the workspace.
Mhm.
And recently, I advocated for myself. I was like, the work I've been putting in lately, I think I'm ready to go and ask for a raise. And I
Oh,
was terrified. Like I
mhm.
was terrified because I've never done that before. Um, or any time that I thought I was ready to do it and I would ask a friend, like, what do you think I should do? I was always kind of discouraged from doing it. Um, and so recently, I mean, I shouldn't say recently, a year ago, I had a baby. And so I was just like, kids are expensive, right? Like she's
Yes.
a joy. I absolutely love her. I wouldn't change anything in the world about her being here, but they're expensive and they grow super fast. And I
Yes.
was like, what I was used to being just like a single woman is not going to cut it anymore now as a
Mhm.
parent.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went and I was like, okay, like I spent the weekend practicing like a speech. Like I had this whole speech prepared. And I went in and I spoke to my director about it. And um in short, she was like, yes, like
Yeah.
yes,
Good.
like you first of all, let me congratulate you for advocating for yourself. And
Good.
so and when I think about that moment, like after all the adrenaline finally came down and I was like, holy crap, I just did that. I sat and wondered, like, how many opportunities did I leave
Mm.
on the floor or were probably lost to me because I didn't advocate for myself, because I kept talking myself out of situations, or I kept allowing other people to talk me out of situations.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it just made me think, like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like I don't want to leave any more stones unturned. So if there's something that's of interest to me that I want to do, I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here, but fuck
Yeah.
it. I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just going to
Okay.
go after it. Like, I'm just going to go
Yes.
after it, because
Yes.
like, at this point, like, the worst that can happen is they just say no. Right.
Right.
And then I either hone in on a skill and try to make myself better so I can get a yes next time, or I just go somewhere else.
Mhm.
Um, but I told myself, especially once I turned 30, I was like, I'm not going to just leave any opportunities out there anymore. Like I have to like go
Yeah.
after everything that I want. That's the only way I'm going to be satisfied. And
Yeah.
I think about this question, that my Spanish professor at Texas State had told me when I was debating if I wanted to study abroad. And he
Mhm.
said, "Are you going to look back on this moment and say, I wish I should have, or are you going to look back on this moment and say, I'm glad I did?"
Yeah.
And I always think about that. And so I use that question a lot, like especially as I've gotten older. Like, am I going to look back on this moment and say, I wish I should have, or I'm glad I did? Um, and so I want more I'm glad I did. Like,
Yeah.
even like, no matter what the result ends up being, like I still want to look back and say, I'm glad I did it.
Well, and that's so
Um,
much about believing in yourself and taking those steps and having that faith that you're also again worthy of those things, that you deserve, you're deserving of these things. And so often we don't ask, because we for whatever reason we keep making ourselves smaller, or we're afraid, or we're worried about what the
yes,
outcome will be. And instead it's like, I too try to remind myself, it's like, how much energy and time am I wasting thinking about doing the thing instead of just doing the damn thing? Like just go sometimes, and that's the thing too, is like recognizing that, I think sometimes we just, again, yeah, we hold ourselves back without understanding then the ways that we're keeping ourselves in those spaces, just because we don't want to, have a fear of failure or fear of rejection, or
absolutely.
worried somebody is going to say no. But like, is somebody saying no the end of the world, the absolute worst thing? No, it's not. Like you just said, okay, well then I'm either going to make myself better or do what's needed to do for that situation, or I'm going to find a different situation. Because somebody saying no
Absolutely.
to me or somebody turning me down for something doesn't change who I am as a person. That
For
just is about
sure.
that situation, right? And so I think
Absolutely.
even like having the awareness, like you do, to really separate those things. You were like, okay, so if she would have said no, you would have walked out of there frustrated, but you would have still known that that isn't about, not about my self-worth. That is not about who I am. That's not about my job.
Right.
So even that knowledge then allows you to step into spaces differently, because you're walking in there asking for things in a different way because you deserve them, or that you're worthy of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that comes along with learning boundaries, like also learning self-worth.
Yeah.
Um, and I attribute having to learn both as another reason why I will say I lost probably some friendships. Like, I think when people get used to walking all over you, or get used to treating you a certain way, and then you finally say,
Mhm.
nah, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I don't like that anymore. Or you're not going to do that. And you start setting that boundary. Um, they tend to just be like, well, I don't like that. Like, I
Yeah.
like the old you. And
Yeah,
so,
the people who benefited the most, the people who benefited the most from you not having boundaries are the people who get all sorts of upset when you start enacting
yes,
them, right? Because
exactly.
it's messing up with what they were then getting from you, or whatever it is. So that's what's hard, because sometimes those are the people who are closest to you, or they're the people who you thought were going to adapt with you or grow with you.
Absolutely.
And so then that can
Absolutely.
be really difficult. Boundaries are so hard. Everybody just thinks, oh, they're easy. But when people sit and look at their lives, it's like most people are good at them in one area, but then are like, it falls apart in others. Or again, it is like you really think you're going to set this boundary and everybody's going to respect it and it's going to flow just fine. But the actuality of it, it is so much more difficult. So it really is like choosing,
Definitely.
I'm going to choose myself in this moment, regardless, and remembering that other people's reactions to your boundaries, that's their feelings. It's not your job to manage somebody else's feelings about your boundaries.
Absolutely.
But that's so much
Absolutely.
harder to do than to just say, right? It's in
Oh,
that
for
moment, sit with
sure.
those feelings.
Because you're still
Really,
trying to keep like those same people in your life, and you're just like, okay, are you one of those people who aren't going to respect my boundaries? And
yeah,
like you said, it's usually the people who you thought were going to grow with you and be a part of your life forever,
yeah,
that you realize, oh shit, like
yeah,
you're not going to be able to move on with me in this next
right.
part of my growth,
Mhm.
because you're one of those people who took advantage of me when I wasn't my best self.
Right. And
Um,
exactly. And not really recognizing your growth, and also then being maybe not supportive of you growing in those directions then, because they don't align with who they thought you were.
Absolutely.
And it can be so hard too, because you have kind of these thoughts where somebody's going to want to just evolve with you. And that's not always how it works out.
Yes. Um, Again, and that's something in the last 3 years have experienced. And I remember just saying to myself, like, I thought I'd be at that point in my life now where I knew who my friends were.
Mhm.
And had to realize it's not so much about them not being my friends. It's just we have come to a place where we view our needs and wants differently.
Mm.
Um, what I need from you, you were, I don't want to say incapable because everyone's capable, but it's just not what you want to give me right now.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and I have to accept that. It's a hard pill to swallow. Don't get me wrong. It's a
Mhm.
really hard pill to swallow. Um, but to me, it's better than the opposite, which is just having someone around just to have them around and them
Yeah.
not treating you how you deserve to be treated.
Right.
And
And
again, that goes in all types of relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, like whatever. Like everything, a relationship should be, people say 50-50, but I say 100-100. Like each of you should go in giving like 100% of yourselves, especially if you care about someone. And so that realization when you realize I'm emptying, I'm pouring more into you than you are into
yeah.
me, it's
Mhm.
just kind of like, well, damn, here we are.
Right.
And you have a decision to make after
You
that.
do, because that's what boundaries do, is they also teach you a lot about your relationships. They show you the people who are going to grow and adapt, and then they show you the people who are not going to be respectful of your boundaries. And then you have that choice. You're like, okay, am I going to continue to allow this? Am I going to continue to allow this person to disrespect my boundaries or change my boundaries and sit with how icky that feels? Or am I going to
Yes.
actually, because that's what it is, right? And if I change my boundary and I feel mad about it, I can't be pissed at the other person
And
if I'm the
yes,
one who changed it,
yes,
and
yes.
that's the thing that people need to recognize too. You got to take some ownership. And my students and I were talking, I heard this quote this week that just hit me so hard. It was like, whatever you're choosing not to change, you're continuing to accept. Isn't this conversation with Dominique such a breath of fresh air? I truly feel so honored to have conversations with former students about their journey in life, and this episode is no exception. I have something really exciting to share with you here, real quick. I'm hosting a masterclass on November 30th called Becoming a Boundary Badass. We will be meeting on Zoom at 6 p.m. Central to go over the juicy basics of boundaries, including what boundaries are, the benefits of boundaries, how to know when a boundary is needed, insight on how to navigate when a boundary is crossed, and a bonus question and answer time. If you'd like to sign up for the free event, click the link in the show notes or send me a DM on Instagram at Dr. Cassandra LeClaire with the words boundary badass, and I'll send you the link. I'm so excited to help you with this, as the holidays can be really overwhelming and stressful for all of us if we're not intentional with our energy within ourselves and with those around us. Now back to the episode with Dominique, or something like that. So it's like, if you're choosing not to change it, you're continuing to accept it. And
Yeah,
I was
for
like,
sure.
oh, yeah. And so
Yes,
often we get into that. It's like, no, we have to make the choice to change it, otherwise,
absolutely.
and it is a choice. And sometimes it's that choice every day or every single moment, like, or reminding yourself, why am I making this choice? Because it is hard, especially if you're disappointing somebody, or if it's somebody that you do love and care about, or you don't want them to be upset with you. So like really remembering, okay, I'm setting this boundary because if I don't, here are the consequences to me,
Absolutely.
professionally, energetically, whatever it is. But it's hard work. And that's the thing, like
Yeah.
reminding yourself that this is work too, that we're doing.
And like you said, it makes you feel icky, like sitting with that, knowing like almost it's like you're beating yourself up. It's like, I know I should cut this person from my life, or I know I should remove this person, or I know this person is no longer respecting our friendship or honoring whatever we have.
Mhm.
Um, but being scared to cut that rope because of, again, like all this time I thought you'd grow with me as a person.
Yeah.
um and so it just becomes like difficult, it becomes hard.
Yeah.
um
And
but
we keep
yes, like
ourselves
you
in
I
this.
like the word that you use, you said yucky, and so yes, you sit with that and you feel kind of yucky that you're just like allowing this to
Yeah.
happen.
Well, and then I think too, it's like really sitting, I got to the point where in some instances, every time I would think about like that person or the situation, I started to like make a note of it. And so then at the end of one day, I was like, oh, that's how much time this is taking up. That's how much
Yes,
energy.
yes,
That's how many times throughout the day I'm going back to that situation. And if I weren't going back to that situation, what else could I be thinking about, and talking about it? And so really it's like, sometimes getting to the place where you're setting the boundary is the hard part, right? Because you got to work through all of that. But then once you finally make a decision to just, it's like you were saying with the race, to just go in and do it, or just go in and have the conversation, just to do whatever you think feels what you need to do, then that's a different space you can step into. Then you're like,
Absolutely.
okay, I'm no longer sitting here wondering what's going to happen over there, or no longer feeling icky or yucky because, I went against my boundary, but instead I'm just going to own whatever this is and know that I'm doing this because this is what I need to do for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, again, I attribute that to one, therapy. If anyone, like, I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I know some people are very still iffy about it, but I attribute a lot of my growth in the last, I'm going to say 6 years, to therapy for sure. Because a lot of things that you let go unchecked, that you've either forgotten about and you've kind of just like put in the back of your mind,
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously, is that the right word? Subconsciously still kind of bother you, like you don't know that they're bothering you, but they kind of
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one thing that, just sitting, I think the first few sessions, just sitting in therapy and just like talking,
Mm-hmm.
just me, just like talking out loud, uncovered so much stuff about myself that I
Yeah.
had put away, that I had was like, this isn't a big deal, or it's fine, I'm just going to swallow this and get over it. And I hadn't.
Yeah.
And I hadn't. And a lot of that, again, it brings me back to boundaries. Like a lot of times I would look at situations and go, I wouldn't have been so hurt or disappointed or let down in that situation if I had set a boundary, or if I had um,
Mm-hmm.
told this person immediately how I felt about something instead of
Yeah.
waiting. So yes, I always go back to, everything comes back to like setting a boundary. Like, again, personal life, work life,
Yeah.
you have to set
And
boundaries.
then
You have
recognizing the
to.
shame cycle, everything the shame cycle that you go into if you didn't set a boundary, so that's what you said. You're looking back and you're like, oh, if I would have done this, then that wouldn't have happened. That's, you're shaming yourself for not standing up for yourself or your belief or whatever in the
Yeah.
first place, right? So it's like, that's what we need to hang on to. We need to sit with that shame and be like, oh yeah, I don't like this feeling. So what am I
Yes.
going to do next time to prevent this feeling? Right. And like,
Right.
that's what it is. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to be here again. So instead, the next time, I'm going to recognize that this is not where I want to be. And that's why I need the boundary, or that's why I need that
Absolutely.
space. And
Absolutely.
it takes work too. Like you said, it takes work, it takes practice, it takes, sometimes that's what I tell everyone too. Start small. Okay. Start with something that doesn't mean anything. And from there, start with
I'm
something.
gonna I'm gonna say, don't ever pray for patience. Like, don't. Like, that is a big jump. Like, that is a huge one. And I feel like I've made that mistake so many times. Like, I really need to learn how to be more patient. Okay, like today is a day. I'm gonna like practice patience. And I feel like God's just like, okay, you said it. And just
Let me test you a little bit on
yeah.
that.
And I'm just like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not ready for that. Um, but yeah, start small for sure. Like, um, I'm an overthinker. I will tell people that right away. Like, I'm an overthinker. I'm an over communicator and an overthinker. So I would much rather you over communicate with me, so my mind doesn't overthink.
Yes.
Um, and especially last year, it like reared up, and I'm so glad that um, between my therapist and like my friends, we were all like keeping each other like in check. But I remember saying, like, I need help with stopping of overthinking, because I found myself going to sleep at like midnight and then like waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just up, just like
Yeah.
overthinking. um and so I remember my therapist saying, start with something small. Like, when you find yourself overthinking, she's like, how do you feel about coloring books? And I was like, coloring's great. She was like, okay, start coloring. She's like, or writing. She's like, distract your brain,
Yep. Refocus.
and refocus. Yes. And so I downloaded so many apps. I downloaded Duolingo. I started repracticing Spanish. Like, it started with something like work, like, of course, since everyone was working from home, like if I messed up something at work, it would just I'm not one of those people who like, okay, it happened, now let's move forward. Like my brain was like, you messed up at like 9 o'clock this morning, and we're just gonna keep thinking about it throughout the day. And I remember one day screwing up at work and having to be like, you know what? I can't go back and change it. Like
Yeah.
I can't. Like there's
Mhm.
nothing I can do. It's happened. It's over. Um, Next time I just have to be more careful. And to stop myself from overthinking, like I wrote that down. Like, you know, it happens. It happens.
Yep.
Next time, just double, triple check your work. Like I had to like write it out in order for it to stop being on my brain. So
Mhm.
yes, it always starts with like little stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so that way when the bigger stuff does come,
Mhm.
um, I've learned how to be emotional, but not how do I want to say this? I've
You're not
learned
being
how to,
reactive. The react.
yes, yes,
Mhm.
not reactive, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's super important because I used to do both. I used to be very good at being emotional and reactive.
Yeah. Same.
Um, and I also had to learn another big lesson, which was everything. And this is how I stopped not stopped, but this is what kind of puts my overthinking into perspective: is everything isn't about you, right? Because
Yeah.
if I call someone and they don't answer the phone, or
Yes.
I'll send someone a text message and they don't respond quick enough to what I feel they should be responding, my mind is just like the worst. Like
Yeah.
it's thinking like they don't want to talk to you, they're ignoring you, you're bugging them too much, you become a nuisance. And I remember someone telling me, they were just like, I'm busy doing X, Y, and Z, Dominique. Like everything isn't about you. And I was like, damn,
Yeah.
you're right. Like it's not.
No, just if that's like the number one piece of advice, I think, and I had to learn this, it took me so long, but now I tell myself this, I tell everybody this: if we could all just stop taking everything so personally, like seriously, and recognize that not most everything is not about us, like that's other people's stuff, that's their life, that's whatever they've got, and then stop reacting to that, well, it would
Yes.
be so much better off, right? If we could
Yeah.
just even start there, but that is,
Absolutely.
so much of that is just trained, and everything you're saying, yeah, your subconscious, that's why, again, starting small, because you really are, we're retraining our brains to think differently, retraining our brains to react and respond differently, because your
Absolutely.
body, your brain, we learn those patterns, so then that just does become your go-to, right? And so that's where, yeah, let's all step back a little bit, sit with it, and then recognize where we're going, where what we really want, instead of just those reactions, or instead of, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, and again, that's another tough pill to swallow when you're
Oh,
like,
for sure.
everything isn't about me. Like,
Yeah, right. And it's like
like
hard because it's
what?
somewhere along the line, all of us have been told that, but it's probably been in a moment where we are feeling that. So then it's like the response is just like,
Absolutely.
what do you mean I'm reactive? I'll show you reactive.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And because again, like in that moment when you're feeling something, you're like, well, I'm feeling this way and it is about me. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it isn't. Like you're feeling how you feel, and I don't want to invalidate your feeling, but that's not what's happening on my end.
Right,
And
right.
so,
And just,
and so
and
then you,
really allowing yourself to understand that. And then also having relationships where people are just open with you about that. Like, look,
yes,
I actually am having this over here. And that's what I think the beauty of my friendships now too, is my friends absolutely know, like, I'm the worst at responding. Like I teach about communication, and then I'm like actually the worst at it in my relationships. It's like, oh yeah, Cass forgot to actually hit send again. Oh yeah, she just actually is not. We'll see.
honestly, I feel like that's a communications thing because, like, my mom, she's like, how are you a communications major? And you sometimes don't know how to communicate.
I
And I'm
know I'm
like,
the worst at it.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so it's learning that, it's like you said way back in the beginning already, the people who are going to be there for you, who are really there for you. And that's what this,
Absolutely.
the communication, the boundary setting. It's like when you find the people who are there for that, who are there for the growth, and who are there along with you, and who are going to tell you, yeah, hey, that's not about you. Or like, come on, stop this, get out of your head on that.
Yes.
Like that's what all of this inner work, you're doing it so not only you can feel better about yourself, but then you get to step into those relationships where those people just feed you to continue that growth and to
Yes.
be better.
And what it does is it also connects you to people who are also um, who know how to adult, who know how to communicate, and who
Mhm.
know how to. Um, there's nothing more reassuring to me, again, in relationships across the board, than when someone says, "I understand how you feel."
Yeah.
um and can, like, they show empathy, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
something, um like, empathy plus a hug. And that's one reason I tell people I hate giving hugs, not because I hate being touched, but I know, like, when I hug you, like, it's like I want to put all, like, everything that I'm feeling, I just want to, like, put it into you in that moment.
Mhm.
And so that's why I only hug particular people, and I'm like, I know I'm going to receive that kind of love back, in essence. um but there's something that's really beautiful in all relationships, having someone who understands you and sees you at your worst and is still like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was actually having this conversation last night with someone, and they were just like, I think all of my, like, they don't really talk to their high school friends, like the friends they're still in contact with are their friends from college. And I was like, it's opposite for me. Like, my friends from high school and I, like, during last year, the shutdown, we used to get on, um what's it called, Clubhouse, Party House. It was some app where you can, like,
Yeah.
play games
Uh-huh.
with each other. But we would, like, every Friday at like 10 o'clock my time, they live in Seattle, so it was 8 o'clock up there. We would, like, get on this app, we'd play games and just, like, talk until, like, the wee hours of the night. And it was just like, my high school friends are the people who I still are, like, my people, like, they're my backbone. And then, like,
Mhm.
here in Houston, my coworkers here, they're like my tribe. And those are the two people who kept me afloat last year, being pregnant during a pandemic and trying to, like, figure out, okay, what's next and
Mhm.
what's going to happen with work. Like, those are the people who I surrounded myself with. And having them there and be like, Dom, we're here for you, and, like, mean that,
Yeah.
meant so much to me,
Yeah.
so much to me.
Well, and I think that that's just, again, such a good testament to you being able to recognize who's doing that for you, understanding the spaces where you can reach out when you needed support, and then really feeling, yeah, like some people had your back and like that you were supported. And there's something that, especially like you said, within the last year and all of the things that you had going on and just that are going on in the world, that's what, that connection and that feeling of support from other people can get you through so many different situations.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that we got a chance to talk today. I'm really appreciative that you were able to just share your story.
Oh my gosh, this
Thank you
was
for coming
great.
in, even though I know you had to get to work. I really
No,
appreciate
you know what? And I had told myself, as soon as I got called in, I was like, I'm not rescheduling this, so we're just gonna have to do
it.
it.
No, I'm glad we made it work. Okay, so where do you want people? Is there anything that we can tell people where to find you, or anywhere that you want them to go to or look up?
Yes, please, please, please check out stageshouston.com, www.stageshouston.com. We are a nonprofit, medium-sized theater here in Houston, Texas. We put on wonderful productions. Our season actually starts this Friday, and we're kicking off with Hook's Tale. It is the story of Captain Hook, but told from Captain Hook's perspective. So it's kind of like, what is it, Wicked?
Oh, cool.
Um,
Mhm.
and check us out online on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all at Stages Houston. And come check us out if you ever find yourself in the Houston area, and ask for Dominique. I am here.
Yay. Oh, well, I'm so glad that we got to chat. I know there are so many things that will really help people just really, see pieces of themselves and everything that you've gone through, and hopefully
Absolutely. I
help
hope.
encourage
Yes.
others to really step into those spaces. So thank you again. We're
Thank
so excited
you.
you're
And
here.
much love to you. Mwah.
Love you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Here are some of my takeaways from this episode. Number one, you may find that you need to set boundaries and let go when it comes to friendships from previous chapters in order to claim your worth and step into the next version of you. Number two, when your dream doesn't quite feel as if it's unfolding how you envision, a leap of faith and a slight pivot truly might bring you to where you're destined to be and what you're destined to do. Number three, when you have pride in what you're doing, you're able to step into your role in a different way with passionate energy. Number four, Theaters are such a foundational aspect to society in many cities, and people like Dominique are out trying to fix the standard to make those spaces more inclusive to the Black and Brown communities. Number 5, once you step up and start advocating for yourself and your worth, you open up opportunities for immense growth in your life. Number 6, choosing yourself and deciding to create a boundary while also knowing that the people who benefited from you not having the boundary will most likely be the ones who are upset. Remember that how someone reacts to your boundary is none of your business. That's on them. Number 7, if you're choosing not to change something, you're choosing to accept it. Take a look at your life and try to be honest with why you are making decisions. Number 8, everything isn't about you. Everyone is leading busy lives, and it's so important, but also very hard, to stop taking everything personally in order to live a life where you are responsive and not reactive. Thanks again for listening to this episode. I'm so happy you're here.